Billow, we look at debt and the government has to borrow for it to function. And we know the parameters upon which the government can borrow. However, we have instances where there is conversations on odious debt that exists in the country. And even that is a matter that is before court today. And one Okiom Tata says that Kenya has overpaid its debt by about 3 trillion shillings. Now, as we talk about odious debt in the country, what are the realities or facts around existence of odious debt, reading together with the Eurobond that did not even follow the process into going to the consolidated account? It was received in an offshore account. What is the reality around odious debt in the country? And if it does exist, then what is the responsibility for the government? Should Kenyans pay for it? Or should we go back again into refinancing terms that have been used in terms to address that? Should we renegotiate on the same?
You know, this case by Omtata is a very interesting, and I think it's is going to be a precedent, not only in Kenya, but I think for many countries in Africa that have a similar challenge. Because there are two aspects of that which are very important when you talk about the odious debts and the case in the court. One is, were these loans properly approved as required by the Constitution? That means, did Parliament approve it? Or were the loans obtained legally? I think that's the question. The second is, were the loans used in the manner required by the Constitution? Were they used to benefit the public?
Yes.
I think those two are fundamental issues that if the court ever makes a ruling on it, would have significant impact on going forward on the way the government will borrow. I have seen the government's, case, arguments that, look, there's an audit going on and the courts should wait for the audit. But let me tell you, we've been asking for this audit for many years.
Yes.
The government has always avoided this audit, or it has always been promised that there's an audit. But I think the issue is not about an audit to know how much our loan is. I think the issue is those two questions. And so it's a very valid argument I think Kenyans have. Now, the question number one, the one on how is this legally approved? I think this is one of the things that, let me tell you, we tried to deal with when we were at Bomas in 2010. Because we tried to argue that, look, the only way to deal with that question is to put the requirement for parliamentary approval before the loan is taken. So that Treasury must seek approval for the facility prior to signing on the. But now I think, with the influence of government and so on, when eventually the Constitution was done, the final that we have now, that was thrown out. And I think what happens now is that Treasury is simply required to submit a report every year on the loans it has borrowed and the terms of those loans and so forth and so forth and so forth. So it's after the fact simply informing Parliament, and that, I think that is where where the weakness is really in our situation. But there's no doubt that their questions have been raised and loudly and in public on some of the loans that have been taken. And a good example is the one you mentioned on the Eurobond, a few years ago. Because the Constitution, let me tell you, there's two aspects of the Constitution that has been always ignored of the Public Finance Management Act. One, the fiscal procedures, the fiscal rules that are required. Loans must be borrowed to finance development. This is very clear in law.
Yes.
Two, development must not be less than 30% of our budget. Both rules are often ignored by Parliament. By Treasury consistently, and there's been no pushback by Parliament really, and I think that is where the issue is. So that even last year, if you look at what IAS published the other day, even last year, 2024-25, only 70% of the money that has been borrowed has been used for development. So that means about 30% of it was actually used for consumption. And this is where the issue is. That's why in the Eurobond then, government had a very difficult time trying to explain what happened to that $2 billion.
Yes.
Where? Just show us. Used it fine, but where did you use it? Which road and where? Which activity? Which program or which project? The fact remains that most of these loans are used to finance the budget. And once you're told it's budget support, then it simply means it can be used for recurrent expenditure also. And that's where the challenge is. The lender has no obligation to you and me or to our representatives in Parliament. The lender simply has an obligation to whoever signs the dotted lines. This is the Treasury. That's one of the challenges. This is why IMF is now seeking immunity to get out of that case.